for joining us once more and Give It a Name at Jennylyn. I am such a privileged human being. I have had so many great opportunities to sit around and speak with fascinating people. And tonight, I have a surprise guest who is very fascinating for many reasons, as you will find out as we continue with tonight's proceedings. And a part of why I do my show is to encourage young people in our community to make better choices with their lives if they don't do so already. And so tonight, I have the privilege of speaking with fascinating Mr. Steve Wozniak, who is one of the co-founders of Apple Computer. And I'm sure this is not something you're hearing for the first time. So, Mr. Wozniak, thank you so much.
Great to be here. You make me feel on top of the world. It's probably, usually the host is supposed to be higher, but...
Well, you know what? I forgot to bring the cushion.
Okay. Little risers.
But just pretend that I'm up there somewhere.
Okay.
How about that? So tonight I'd like
it's your show.
Thank you.
And thank you for inviting me too. That was very nice. It was, I love to do these things, and you were patient not to set a schedule where I had to agree long in advance.
And I'm so grateful to you that you are here on such short notice. I have to tell you, I didn't sleep last night because I could not believe that this was going to be happening today.
Yeah. Actually, it wasn't that unlikely because I believe very strongly in community television and the good of it. I have other friends that are occupied in the craft, and also, and the subject matter you mentioned was very appealing to me.
Oh, great. Thank you. So that's why I want to begin with your life before Apple Computer. Can you tell me about Steve Wozniak?
Grew up as one of those little smart techie kids, going out building his own little projects, like a lot of us do. We're kind of, you don't see him. Maybe there's only, one or two in his school, and they all like to hang out together, and building your own projects is the main part of our background. And I got somehow just... You learn things through life by accidents. And I would say that the places that got me on the course that I'm known for today were largely accidental things that I stumbled onto. A journal article, a description in a manual, something that I learned, and it was always involved with learning something that I wasn't taught in school. It was like personal things that I wanted to know for myself, and I wasn't required to know to where I could answer a test on it. And I think that really let me learn these things. Computer design, everything involved in computer design.
Right.
I mean, it starts out with bare understanding atoms and electrons, and then how electrons go through wires, and they light lights, and how switches work. And you work your way up through time, just like technology advances. Televisions were tubes, and then we went to little tiny transistors, and now everything's on a chip, and you learn these things. But it's interesting to learn them, and usually the things that I do the best on, are the things that I had a personal reason for wanting to do.
Awesome. So where did you grow up, and who was your greatest influence?
Okay, I'm very proud that I was born in San Jose. I could tell you an awful lot of facts about that city because it's important to me, and it's one of the reasons that I try to contribute back to the places that were important in my life.
Okay.
And then in about 1958, I moved from Southern California up to Sunnyvale. My father worked at Lockheed.
Okay.
And there were a lot of engineers moving into town to work at Lockheed, but as far as we could see from our house, which was on the Cupertino border, as far as you could see in any direction was orchards. This was a very pleasant area. The streets were new, and go down the street to only a couple little places nearby to buy groceries and all that. So it was a great place to grow up. All the kids, we had so many little electronics kids on my block. I would say half the kids did electronics. And we would go, and like kids do, we'd do the gardening for the next door neighbor. And then instead of being paid in cash, we had him pay us in parts out of his garage. We'd look at all these mayonnaise jars full of little parts and pick out the ones that looked the best or that we thought we had an idea of how to use, And we did a lot of, we also learned we had a lot of that misbehavior fun in those days when the kids are running around wild doing their own things. And I think back and I feel so sorry for the kids that can't grow up doing a little bit of, wrong things, going off and setting off the firecrackers and making little electronics devices that fool people, that sort of thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, very, very lucky where I grew up. So I grew up in Silicon Valley as it evolved, and the orchard trees went down, the homes went in, the little corner shopping centers went in, and we pretty much filled up with the electronics industry during my life. It was called Santa Clara Valley,
Okay.
and then eventually in the early 70s it took on the name Silicon Valley because so many companies were making parts based on silicon. And I got to see it firsthand. As a matter of fact, when I was about, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old, somewhere in that frame, my father took me to a show in San Francisco called WestCon. And at this one little booth, a guy held up a picture for me to see. A little tiny kid showed me a picture of all these blocks that looked like buildings with roads connecting them.
Yeah.
And he said, this is a circuit, an integrated circuit we're making, a chip that has 6 transistors on the one piece of silicon.
Wow.
Instead of 1 transistor, you
Yeah.
got 6. That was like the start of chips. And the guy showing it may have been Gordon Moore or something. And all these things just enthralled me. I mean, I was kind of like going along with, if you're in Silicon Valley, you're going along with the state of the art.
So at what age were you when this all started happening and when you built your first computer?
Well, probably around 10 years old.
Wow.
I had learned an awful lot. I did science fair projects, normal ones.
Okay.
Like switches and lights and that kind of simple stuff. But I did a huge project by 4th grade, huge project, or 5th grade. And it had like 92, there are 92 natural elements in the periodic table.
Yes.
So you had 92 switches, one for each element. And when you threw a switch, there were 92 lights. The right lights in the right electron orbits would turn on. And this is actually a very, very difficult thing to do. You have to get a little bit into computer logic because you turn on one switch and one light comes on. Turn on another one and that light, and a second comes on. You turn on a third switch and those lights aren't on, but a different one is. I mean, different 3 are. Sometimes the lights change order. So to handle that kind of weird logic, there's no simple way to do it with just switches. You have to start learning computer logic that can make decisions. Decide if you're at a certain position, you do this. If you're not at that position, you do something else.
Right.
It's basically a decision-making circuit, and I learned that these little decision-making circuits took one little tiny transistor and a couple other parts, how to make those decisions. And so by 6th grade, I built a tic-tac-toe computer. It could play tic-tac-toe and never lose. Because tic-tac-toe, if you were to play every game on paper, this is what I did in that age. It took me about 2 days over a weekend to play every possible game of tic-tac-toe.
Right.
And then study them, and I wrote a set of rules. If the X's are here and the O's are there, here is your next move to avoid losing. I made a set of rules. Each rule became one of those little circuits with one transistor called the logic gate, a decision maker. And then all my decision makers told me, where to make the move on tic-tac-toe. So that was a huge project because for such a young child, I look at young children now, and then I think back, how did I build these things with 92 of these big lights and 92 switches and lots of other diodes? How did I build this tic-tac-toe computer with hundreds of transistors? I pounded nails into wood, and then I learned I soldered the leads onto the nails. And I was good at soldering because I already had a ham radio license by then. You have to study. You have to actually study. I had built my own ham radio transmitter and receiver, all myself, no help from my dad, soldering all the parts together. It comes as kits. So I had built those up. So I soldered all these transistors and decision-making parts of the tic-tac-toe computer, and it was just hundreds of transistors on a board. That's a huge project for a little kid. And when I look back, I think I learned more about long projects that have a lot of components in them and a lot of different levels of learning and technology involved. That's sort of the discipline that's good for when you get a job and you work on real projects in the end. They aren't going to be take it home overnight and do your homework like in school. It's like real long projects. And almost thinking back, I just wish kids were assigned a project, coming into school that was that huge. Here is your final exam. During this year, here are your books, and your books have all the clues to build it. Well, the smart kids are going to go out and read those books and start working, and within 1 month finish the whole class. Because they're learning on their own, they're going to learn better than they learn in school. And there's, and what I found was in school, everybody went home and learned something, and then everybody had the same right answer. But the right answer wasn't theirs. It came from the book. You learn to trust sources. Sources have the right answer, and that teaches you not to believe in yourself. And in my case, I was one of those kids that was out there building our own things. We didn't have books to do it. So that was a much better way to learn and learn that we had abilities and could trust ourselves to come up with solutions and, things in the world. We didn't have to believe it was all in books, our future.
It just blows me away to hear you say this.
Well, it was so exciting, too. And it was exciting because you're in elementary school. You're in middle school. I was building big projects. And I have some great, in high school, I was very lucky. I had one teacher, the most important teacher of my life. Mr. McCullum had an electronics course at Homestead High School
Yeah.
that was better equipped than any of the courses, even at the local colleges like Foothill.
Yes.
I mean, his courses were well thought out. He hand wrote them himself. He didn't use a book. He hand wrote the courses, knowing what we had and what he was going to teach us in what order. And we had all this great test equipment. How did he get so much test equipment in a high school? You know, it costs money.
Yeah.
Well, the way he did it was he bought low-cost kits in his early years of the school, when the school started. I was like the 4th year of Homestead High School.
Okay.
And the first year bought equipment, and they learned electronics as they built, using soldering irons and putting together. They built maybe a meter. And another class built a signal generator. Another class built an oscilloscope. So by the time I got there, every student in his class had a full set of equipment for everything, you know, we really need to do to test televisions, learn how they work and repair them and things like that. So it was an incredible, looking back, there you can't find, you're very lucky. It was called a vocational course.
Okay.
Most of the kids that took electronics weren't from the college prep type classes like I was. They were from class 2, and I was sort of class 1. But when you combine good mathematics and electronics, that's the heart of engineering. You know, you have to know how to do a lot of real mathematics, calculations, strong calculations, to figure out if a circuit's going to work or not. But Mr. McCullum did something even better. He took a couple of bright students every year. He looked at me and he said, "You already know everything in this class." And that was true. He said, "So I'm arranging for you to go to a company. I met an engineer at a company, and he's going to let you go down once a week, and you get to program a thing called a computer." Okay,
Wow.
and we didn't have computers in our school, and I thought, oh my God, I get to program a computer. You know, I got a Fortran manual, and I learned a computer language, and I wrote my programs, and wow, what an experience for the rest of my life. You know, and this was done by a teacher in a school, but it had nothing to do with getting a grade in that school. Had nothing to do with it. It was out on the own. I almost like you get a little field trip every week, and it was learning. For the rest of my life, all I wanted was a computer. I could type in my programs and somehow run them. In those days, you had to punch out old computer cards and feed them in, you know, a lot more rigmarole than just typing and seeing an answer on a TV. But I decided I wanted my own computer, and I told my dad. Well, there was a step in between. I also started designing computers, because I accidentally, it was all accidents in my life. I stumbled on a manual that described a computer. And it described a computer the way you might describe this building.
Right.
Which is where there are certain rooms in certain places. That doesn't tell you how to build this building, does it?
No.
No. But I knew all these little decision-making things from my elementary school and middle school projects, the science fair projects. So I knew how to build things out. So I sat down on paper, and I started trying to design a description of a computer.
Amazing.
And it took me a long time, and I didn't succeed at first, but I went back and I tried it and finally got to where, whoa, the newest chips that were coming out. My dad got me some manuals of chips. I could actually design pretty much the heart of almost any of the small computers of that day. So I started designing one after another, after another, after another, every spare weekend. I didn't go out with friends. I was very shy, didn't have many friends. I would just stay in my room and figure out, how can I do this? I was never going to have a job doing it. I was never going to get a salary or a grade or any of the things of life that are called rewards.
Right.
I just wanted to do it like you want to get good at crossword puzzles. That's just as valuable. I could have been I want to get really good at spelling bees, you know, and spelling words. Well, my thing was designing computers, and got extremely good at it, but I knew that I could never afford a single part to build one. I'd call up companies and ask them to give me the parts, and they wouldn't. I never succeeded. But that was in high school, and then I told my dad, someday I'm going to have a 4K. Doesn't sound like much memory now, but 4K is the minimum amount of memory. You can run a programming language that you could type in a program and solve your problems. For example, my problem might be a puzzle I saw in the newspaper.
Right.
I'll write a program to do it. Well, I want that ability. So I said I want a 4K Data General Nova computer. It was a beautiful computer for a different architecture than all the ones before it. It was totally different, and it wound up being half as many chips to make as a result. So I appreciate things that are efficient and take very few parts. And I told him I'm going to have one of those, and he said it costs as much as a house. So I sat there stunned. I didn't have a reply right away. I said, I'll live in an apartment. Somehow, if I give up a house, I'll
Right,
get a
right, right.
computer.
Yeah.
Well, I made the decision. I was going to have a computer somewhere in my life. Turns out that there were an awful lot of people that I didn't know in other schools, in other states, all over the country, that also felt the same way, but they were pretty much loners like myself. We didn't have a way to get together and find out there were others that wanted their own computer.
Right.
And that happened a little later in life.
Wow, perseverance and determination is what I keep hearing.
No, it was more like just love and passion.
Right.
Just knowing, feel inside what you want so badly, and you'll make sacrifices, and you're going to get it. And it doesn't matter that nobody else wants it.
Right. So how did you meet Steve Jobs?
Turns out that after 2 years of college, I decided I wanted to pay for my third year of college rather than
Yes.
take a loan. So I took a year off to work and earn the money for a car and my third year of college at
Yeah.
Berkeley. Well, during that year, I mentioned to one of the executives how I used to design all these computers in high school. And he said, "You never built one?" And I could never afford the parts. He said, "Oh, he had connections to the chip companies here in Silicon Valley. And his computer company bought a lot of chips.
Right.
He said he could get them for me." My God, I went home and I designed a very simple computer, brought back my list of chips, and he got them for me. I mean, I can't even remember exactly who it was, but what an amazing thing in my life. I actually went down and went to a friend's house, and we're building this computer in his garage. And he says, "You got to meet this other guy, Steve Jobs, because he
Amazing.
knows digital chips
Yeah, yeah.
and how to make things like counter displays and stuff. And he also plays some pranks at the high school. So he called Steve Jobs over, and Steve came over, and we were sitting there, talking about the pranks we had done and the things that we did as far as digital chips and designs and,
Yes.
and what was coming up, and we hit it off really well. So
Obviously you did.
Yeah.
So how did you guys come up with the name Apple and why?
okay. This goes to a much later point in time because
Okay.
I was on my own. Steve was up in Oregon, and I was going to this club called the Homebrew Computer Club.
Okay.
And they were talking about a revolution. And I love the word revolution. I always wanted to be sort of a rebel.
Okay.
Almost ever since the Vietnam War. I just
Okay.
a lot of distrust of authority.
Right.
But revolution was a good word in my mind. And they were talking about social changes, better education, better communication. The small guy could go into work and outdo all the big company, high-paid programmers and come up with better answers for how to run the company. And I wanted to be a part of making that happen with my technical skills. So I went and modified something else I'd already built. And I built one project after another actually, and Steve Jobs always found a way to turn them into money. So we'd sold this thing called a terminal. I added some chips to it and made it its own computer. I finally saw the formula to have that computer I wanted in my life,
Yeah.
that I could type real programs in and get them to run and calculate real answers. And I could do that for two things. I worked at Hewlett-Packard as an engineer
Okay.
by then. And I could solve my engineering work, but I also had encountered computer games.
Okay.
And they fascinated me. These early games, Star Trek and Wumpus, little tiny games like that. And I'd seen the one they did on a screen from
Yeah.
Digital Equipment Corporation, where little rocket ships are flying, you steer them around and don't get pulled into the sun. And I loved that game too. And I just wanted so much for games. So I finally had that machine built, and I passed it out for free at the club. I gave it away, no copyright notices. Here's a schematic, build your own, because I figured people would, "Oh my gosh, look at this. It's hardly any parts." They could look at my board. It's,
Yeah.
maybe 30, 40 chips that are $1 chips, and oh my gosh, I can build my own computer. They didn't really have not very many of them had the technical skills of soldering and building things. That was the problem. They wanted computers, but they're more like software people. They wanted it
Okay.
pre-built.
Right.
So then Steve Jobs came back from Oregon. He came to the club and he saw this activity. He saw the interest. And he said, "Why don't we make them a PC board? Then it's easy for them to build. You plug all the parts into one PC board, solder it pretty easy, and it's a very simple task, and it works." First I said, "I won't do that because I work for Hewlett-Packard. I won't start another company on the outside and risk getting fired."
Right.
And so I decided Hewlett-Packard should be given the first rights to this idea. And I went to them and I pleaded. I did everything I could do. I wasn't the most skilled politician or,
Right.
Dealing with people. I was just an engineer who had an idea and a product, and they turned me down for the first of 5 times.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, they turned me down many times right in my division. Even when they started a similar project, they wouldn't even let me work on it when I asked to. But I got turned down, so we had a company, and Steve came back from Oregon one day, flew in. As I was driving along, he says, I got a great name for the company, Apple Computer. And he always said he worked in orchards in Oregon, so I assumed, I hope there's apple trees there. But I'm the quiet guy. I don't ask a lot of questions of people. I don't ask where you come from. And it was really funny because many years later, about 2 years ago, at the end of my Dancing with the Stars season, a doctor who had treated some of my wounds sat down next to me, and he said his brother had been on that orchard with Steve Jobs, and his brother had actually given him the name. He said, I got a great name for your company. You know, and it is.
That is wild.
But listen, were you around back then?
Me?
Yeah, in those days when we came up with Apple Computer?
Yes, I was already living
and
here.
And the Beatles, so you knew the Beatles, and their record company was Apple Records.
Right.
Okay, so it was a name that was common, but you don't want to step on somebody else's name.
Right.
So when Steve Jobs said Apple Computer, the first thing I said was, what about Apple Records? And he says, well, they're a record company and we're a computer company. I said, oh, that's all it takes? And he said, yeah.
So that was it. Well, you know, we're running out of time, and I have so much I want to ask you. And since maybe we should do this again sometime.
Oh, yeah, easy to take it on from here, yeah.
Okay, great. So how does it feel for you when you walk around daily and you see people with your technology and you know?
Yeah, well, what I see is mostly people using modern technology that I didn't have a part really in developing.
Okay.
I mean, I did help start a good company, and I was a part of a lot of the culture and the values that drive it on to continue to be a great company, maybe, and I did. But usually when I run into people that say, oh my gosh, the products you designed, the early Apple computers, the Apple II, was such a big part of my life, or I learned it from it, or I studied it. How you designed that, I looked at your entire design. Because we published things. Everything was open source back then. All the code that was in it, all the circuits. And I like it when they appreciate that I was a great engineer and came up with really clever connections of the right chips and thought of things, you know, in amazing ways. I like that the most. When people come up to me and say thank you, they're really saying, thank you for making me feel good about something in life. You're a part of it. You were there at the start. And so I just smile at them, and I'm glad that they're happy.
Well, you're a prolific engineer, that's for sure.
Not so much these days.
Oh, well, you were at some point.
I wasn't. So it was at some point. Right now, I'm a very, very, very good genius. I'm a genius. But the only thing I'm a genius at is convincing people that I am a genius.
Well, you've certainly convinced me.
Good.
Well, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you, you did go dancing on the stars. You did do that.
Yes.
And I remember the first time I saw you, I said, I know you from somewhere. Why do I know you? And it took me 3 or 4 days, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I saw you on Dancing with the Stars. So that's where I had seen you, and I watched it so many times I felt like I had met you.
You know, it's funny. That show called me up, and I don't watch television. I haven't watched television in 20 years or so. I didn't know what Dancing with the Stars was. I had no idea what dancing was. I've never seen it in my life in any way. So, of course, I knew they made a mistake. And I turned them down. It takes about a year, but they're real nice and persistent, and they finally talk you into it. But I will tell you a secret. Most of the celebrities that go on, they just fought it and did not want to embarrass themselves on TV like that and go in thinking, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do this and learn it and not stumble all over the place and look like the worst dancer ever. Well, I proved you can look pretty bad and still make people smile.
I don't know about that, because from where I was looking, you were engineering yourself competitively while it was happening. Would you ever, or do you still dance?
I did. I intended to keep it up because I really came to love dancing. I watched that show and no other. That's about the only show that I TiVo.
Right.
And I really do love it. And I go down sometimes to watch it live.
Okay.
And I know some of the little technical aspects of how you're supposed to do the steps, so I have a little advantage in my own judging how well they're doing, you know, and reliving things. But my wife and I were going to take dance lessons and got as far as getting her the dance shoes, but our schedules got real busy around that.
Well, it sounds like you're a very busy
guy.
Not
yet.
And it sounds like you're in demand, which is why I feel so special that you're sitting here with me tonight. Mm-hmm. And so,
by the way, dancing is very hard, like learning computers.
Is it?
You have to start somewhere. You have to do little steps at a time. You learn rules, and you build upon those rules, and it can take a long time to, you know, really learn the dance as well, like what you see on TV.
Okay.
Well,
I love dancing, so it's easy for me.
But if you like learning a whole bunch of memorizing a whole bunch of little intricate things, which way you're supposed to turn a finger at this point in time. That's for you.
Well, I think when you're doing it competitively, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, it's tough.
Right?
But it's tough, man. You just sweat for 6 hours a day, and you can't feel if you have a broken bone. Everything hurts so much.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, are any of your children following in your footsteps in terms of...
Well, thank you for asking. I've never been asked that hardly.
Really?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Oh, really?
Yes. My first son was quite gifted in school, winning math awards like me, and he went off to Carnegie Mellon and came out with a computer science and mathematics minor degree, and he did it in 4 years. I don't know any member of my family ever that would be able to get through college in 4 years. A lot of different experiences. And he worked for NASA for a while and recently quit NASA. Not retired, but he's looking for the exciting things going on in Silicon Valley. The new stuff, everything from smartphone apps and all that. I have a daughter who was super at math, and when she got to college, she would not take any math or science. And she just knows how to get through the system fine. And so she's in law school now, actually.
Well, congratulations.
And my third son is the most like me, a little bit of a misbehaviorist. And he didn't do as well in school as I did, but he's going to graduate this year in computer engineering, hardware and software of computers, just right there with me. And
wow, I can't believe we're out of time. But I want to ask you this question. I've had the privilege of being in your company in public places on quite a few times, and I've noticed how caring and kind you've been to people who constantly interrupt you because they want to get your signature or say something to you or acknowledge you. How does that make you feel inside?
I don't think about it. Because that was, I decided how I wanted to be. Personality and values when I was young, like, 18 to 20, when you pick religions and things. And this was sort of like my little internal religion, what makes you good. And I don't want to be like those. You hear about people, especially people who get very wealthy, and how it corrupts their values and they turn into kind of nasty people that can't be found and gotten and don't deal with the ordinary people. And I never wanted to be one of those, and I pretty much succeeded.
Thank you. And my last question, is there anything you would change about the way you've lived your life thus far? And what advice would you give to the people out there about their dreams and aspirations?
Okay. First, I would not change my life because I look back to every step I have and people say, do you have regrets? Would I have done something differently? No. I know that I was in control from what I knew then and where I was then and how I thought. I made the right decision for the way I think. And I just don't want to go back and say, oh my gosh, I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done something different. Not even wishing I'd married other people,
Thank you so much. I don't mean to cut you off, but we've run out of time, and I'm so grateful to you. I've learned a lot from you, and I hope that the young people watching the show will follow in your footsteps. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to my crew, and have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.